Ladies and gentlemen, I am Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It is September 24th, 2022. This is your daily Ukraine update, and we are going to be asking ourselves, is Russia still unable to stabilize its front lines? And is there anything left they can do to try to reverse this failing situation? Let's get into it. So when we take a look at the map, we can see there are really minor changes. Let's see. Interestingly enough, near Bakhmut, this was actually Russia's operational target prior to the offensive. They were hoping to seize this city. It's a major transportation hub. You can see it's at the intersection of several major highways and would enable them to start to circle this larger region of Seversk. Obviously, those plans have been put on hold, probably indefinitely, but you can see here that actually there's just a tiny minor little change to the front lines. I don't think this indicates an attack. I think this indicates a repositioning, or even just additional intelligence. But what the real significant change is, well, you can see, as we've discussed, if you've been on this channel for more than 10 seconds, you know that the entire Russian really war effort in the north is hinging on holding this line here east of the Oxy River. And the reason it's so essential is obviously because the river itself is a really hard to cross natural obstacle. It's creating a natural barrier between Ukrainian forces and Russian forces. So it's just a lot easier to defend this entire stretch of land here. But Ukrainian forces have flanked around it, crossed this river, crossed the Oxy, all along this front line here. You can actually see all the places that they've crossed all the way to Ozerne. So this line, there's no geographic feature stabilizing this. You could see Russia might be trying to use maybe these roadways, but when we see, and for a couple of days, it looked like Russia might have actually been able to establish a new defensive line. But when we look at yesterday, right, we look at the last couple days, we can see actually that's not the case. This line is continually being pushed backward, and Ukrainian forces are continuing to advance, particularly here at Yatskiva. This is significant for a couple of reasons. First, because this is sort of an anchor for Russia. As discussed, its ability to control the eastern bank of the Oxy is Oskil. God. You know, I haven't had my coffee. Please forgive me. I don't think I've gotten a river name right in this entire, like, 6-month conflict. But as you can see, controlling the eastern bank of this Oxy River is so essential to Russia's strategic efforts. So if Ukrainian forces can start to peel them away from it, right, you really worry. Well, worry is probably a strong word. Russia's going to have a really hard time retaining territory. Again, imagine if they can control, say, this bridge here at the Oxy Reservoir, and now all of their forces that are sitting here can flood across and create a second opening that could really cause Russia even more problems. And the fact that these lines cannot seem to hold, that they keep collapsing in the face of what's probably fairly limited Ukrainian pressure, right? As you guys can see, Ukraine has to hold all of this newfound territory. So a lot of those forces that were on offense are probably digging in near the Russian border, right? Digging in across this river, digging in at all the different bridges and potential crossing points to ensure that Russia isn't going to try to counterattack. But despite all that loss to their forces, they are still falling back and yielding territory to the Ukrainians, especially as they're peeled away from this Oxy River. Now, when we look over at the news, we could see Institute for the Study of War is basically repeating what I told you guys yesterday, that Russia says this partial mobilization is going to be for combat-proven troops who have already completed their mandatory military service, who are going to be as close to ready to fight, as possible, right? Maybe some brief. And what's being sold by Russia is that people who have already served in a combat zone, who have already had military service, are going to get a quick refresher training and be sent to shore up the disasters at this front. The reality, though, is shaken out to be very, very different. First off, there's some leaked documents indicating the Kremlin wants to mobilize 1.2 million men, not 300,000. That, of course, if they can pull it off, which seems unlikely, if they could pull it off, that would be enough to decisively change the outcome of the war, for sure, even if they're 1.2 million men of questionable combat readiness. But when you look at who's actually getting pulled into this effort, you can see that it looks like the Russian bureaucracy just is looking to just put bodies in seats and do not much more than that. Some people say that older men, we've certainly seen pictures of that. Students who were excluded. If you're a full-time student, you were excluded from this draft. Employees of military industries, literally the people manufacturing war materials, and civilians with no military experience at all have all been receiving mobilization notices. We've, of course, seen the video of people who simply run afoul of the regime for one reason or another, usually due to protesting, receiving mobilization notices. Right. These, of course, the Russian Ministry of Defense says all these people would be exempt from this mobilization. Other sources are indicating that airport and airline workers are being drafted, right? And remember, Russia is still a country with a lot of private industry. It's not like China, where most major industries are state-controlled or state-affiliated. So, as you can imagine, if you are a major airline employee, or the owner of an airline, or the owner of a major textile or chemical industry, and suddenly some of your managers, your mid-level executives are getting drafted, you would be furious as a taxpayer employer, and frankly, probably someone closely connected to Putin. Of course, the Russian government's FAQ portal says that mobilization officials may mobilize part-time students, despite the Kremlin saying that no students at all would undergo mobilization. Some people are saying, soldiers with prior military experience are being assigned to very different specializations from those in which they served. I suspect this is probably cooks being reclassed to infantry, and some people say they're even mobilizing men with chronic illnesses. This is a huge problem, as you can imagine. If you were, let's say, a diabetic, getting insulin to the front, not really possible in this conflict. So you are basically going to waste a uniform and body armor sending someone that sick. All in all, I think this is a pretty clear indicator that, well, frankly, this is just a huge, huge mess. And actually, you can see more and more news stories are talking this up. Of course, we go through ground news, right? They let you see how the same story is covered across the political spectrum. Pretty essential in this conflict. Link is in the description. You can see long lines at every Russian border crossing. Military-age men have seen the writing on the wall. They understand that this conflict is going to come for them. It sort of has already, right? I suspect that some portion of young, healthy men probably believed what the Russian government said, which was that, mobilization would only be for conscripts, only for combat experience. And now enough rumors have been circulating, enough footage is circulated, that they realize that no, they are probably on the list as well. And so they are getting the F out of Dodge. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Of course, if you want access to some uncensored combat video breakdowns, you guys have probably noticed YouTube has really cracked down on the censorship. So if you want to see those videos and get my take on them, you want to become a member of the Patreon. Link is in the description. And I'll see you guys in the next one.